Welcome back to Lead Story. We're focusing on the Bank of Jamaica's recent decision to once again lower its policy rate, a move that, in theory, should encourage commercial banks to follow suit by reducing their own interest rates. However, that shift has yet to materialize. Join me to unpack these very important movements and what this means for businesses, consumers, the broader economy are Garnett Reid, President of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, and Barbara Hume, the CEO of Jamaica Bankers Association. Welcome to you both to Lead Story.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to start with you, Mr. Reid. Now, you have been extremely vocal on this issue. You have called out, you have started a campaign of sorts. I don't know if you're into politics, but you started a campaign.
A former politician.
and I'm asking you.
I am now in the business community.
Yeah. How are your members in the Bankers Association feeling? Small Business Association?
First of all, let me just say that we started this campaign 8 months ago. Mm-hmm. The Bank of Jamaica, BOJ, on 5 consecutive times.
In 9 months?
In 9 months of reduced interest rate. They call upon the banks to reduce their interest rate. To date, mm-hmm. the bank have yet to do that. Mm-hmm. I have met with the banks. I have met with JMMB, NCB, BNS. And while they express a willingness to reduce the interest rate, it has yet to come. Interest rate is now 18 to 19%. When you reduce interest rate, what will happen is that more business people, SME, will borrow more money, mm-hmm. so you'll get more interest.
Yeah.
They will have the opportunity to pay their credit card, their mortgages, and their loans mm-hmm. as well. When you hold on the interest rate, by not reducing the interest rate, you make life difficult for the struggling SME to continue to pay their bills and so on and so forth.
So basically you're saying it would make it a little bit easier for those who are in business, small and medium businesses that would, I would say, need more liquidity.
That is correct.
To grow their business or to invest in machinery, etc. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to throw this one to Barbara now. Barbara is here with us online. Why do you think the commercial banks have been slow to pass on these reductions to consumers and businesses alike?
Hi, thanks again for having me. And let me just start by correcting that incorrect statement. Our banks have in fact started to make reductions to their interest rates. Those reductions may not have been broadly publicized across the board, but our various member institutions have in fact started to reduce their interest rates. And I think Garnett mentioned 3 institutions that he would have spoken to. I can tell you that the head of at least one of those institutions would have shared with me today that his institution has in fact started to lower their rates. So I'm not sure who you would have spoken with, Garnett. It's not an across-the-board reduction, as we're saying, because remember, pricing is a function of risk. So our banks would be looking at particular segments where they feel ready and comfortable and justified in making these reductions. I should also remind Garnett and the public at large that many of our member institutions in the JBA, many of our member banks, do in fact have dedicated pools of funds at attractive rates of interest that are available to our small and medium enterprises and to businesses that are engaged in the productive sector. So there is targeted funding available for our SMEs, and our banks have in fact started to look at reducing their rates, and in some cases have actually started to reduce their rates.
And on that point, Barbara, I just want to ask you, since as you've said, there is at least one bank, lead of one bank that would have said they've started this process. Can you tell us which bank this is and how are they looking at it? Is it strategic? Is it particular to consumers in particular ways? How will we see this, and which bank are you talking about?
And this is good news.
I am here to represent the Bankers Association, which is the industry lobby group. So I'm not going to be, and nor am I authorized to speak on behalf of any particular institution. But as I said, where the banks have determined that it is appropriate to start making their interest rate adjustments, it has started to happen. Let me also hasten to remind the public at large that during the last tightening cycle, when the BOJ moved interest rates its signal rate from 0.5% all the way up to 7%, right? This was on the back of the recovery from COVID-19, when we had fears about inflation. You may recall the BOJ then expressing its concern that the banks were not passing along these interest rate increases to our customers fast enough, nor at, in the magnitude that the BOJ would have wanted to see. So if you look at it, with the banks, in an effort to protect their customers, right? Because I think it's important for the public to understand that the banks are not your enemy. The banks are here to serve you, and the banks do as well, and they thrive when you do well.
I'm going to pause you there a bit, Barbara, to come back into studio with Garnett to ask Garnett. You spoke about the slow pace at which the installation of these rates would have been happening, and that leads me to ask Garnett, what impact does this have on the small businesses? Well,
the impact how we have on the small businesses that we are paying interest rate between 18 and 90%. And therefore, reduced interest rate would give the SME an opportunity to, as I said, borrow more money to pay their loans and pay their bills and so on and so forth. But I just want to say something. She mentioned that interest rates have been reduced. I'd like to know what percentage. I would like to know if this was advertised, because just a few days ago, the governor of the Bank of Jamaica was appealing to the banks to reduce interest rate again for 5 consecutive times. Okay?
Yeah.
And to date, I have met with NCB, BNS, JMMB. And while I think there is a willingness to reduce interest rate, they said they have to go back to board, they have to speak to their management team.
So you've met with them, and you're saying you haven't heard anything?
I haven't heard anything.
Okay, so Barbara, I just want to say
Garnett,
something. I want her to respond to that
I just want to say
after
something.
you finish.
The Minister of Finance appealed to the banks. The Minister of Investment, Industry and Commerce, the Bank of Jamaica Governor, we, the Small Business Association of Jamaica, is appealing to the bank to reduce interest rate to help the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise.
Yeah. So, Barbara, I wanted to respond to the statements here by Garnett just now.
Yes, well, thank you. Just to finish up on the point I was making before, though, to the extent that the banks did not increase interest rates during the last tightening cycle, it means that in many cases, rates were kept constant, okay? And now that the BOJ has been reducing its signal rate, it means that there is less room for the banks to make that adjustment. But that being said, banks have in fact started to reduce their interest rates. Of course, you have to have regard to things like their cost of funding, okay? Their credit losses and the overall cost of doing business. What I would encourage the members of the Small Business Association to do is to speak with their bankers. This is a competitive market, and you really owe it to yourself to inform yourself as to what is available in market.
All right, let me just hold it there. We're going to go for a quick break, and we'll come right back into this conversation about the policy rate shift by the BOJ and the impact from the banks and what impacts they have on small businesses. Stick with us. We're still here in Lead Story. We're back with you. It is indeed Lead Story. We've been talking to Barbara Hume, the CEO of the Jamaica Bankers Association, and in studio with me I have Garnett Reid, who is the president of the Small Business Association of Jamaica. We've been talking about these rate cuts that the BOJ has been calling for, particularly through Mr. Richard Biles, the governor of the Bank of Jamaica. And I want to go back to Barbara to say, we've been having this conversation this evening, and you've said at least one bank has said they've started cutting. But how do you respond to the BOJ governor's consistent call over and over again after this fifth rate cut publicly to cut rates from the banks? How do you respond to that?
So the JBA and our member institutions, we are in active dialogue with the BOJ about what Governor Biles would have been speaking about. There are lots of discussions taking place behind the scenes, but again, I have to remind us that the signal rate, which I'm sure Governor Biles would also agree with, is only one ingredient in the mix. There are many other factors at play here.
Could you tell me some of those other factors that are at play?
Thank you.
Well, I just mentioned before the break, we have to look at things like the cost of our deposits, right? We have to look at our credit losses. Remember, every time, when banks make loans, they're not always repaid on time or according to plan. So that has a bearing as well on the cost of credit. And, the credit the pricing of any loan to anyone is a function of the borrower's risk profile, right? And it is a function of the risk associated with the product. So to go back to one of the points I was making earlier about how our banks have started to selectively, look at reducing rates, where particular client segments, where the repayment history is such and the risk profile is such that a decrease in rates is merited. That has in fact started to happen. On particular products, the rates have started to come down. Perhaps, the skepticism is born of the fact that this has not been very broadly and widely publicized. But again,
before
this is where I'm encouraging.
Before I come to Garnett, Barbara, I don't wish to stop you here, but I just wanted to understand some examples of the specific products that we've seen reductions in, because I think that can inform this conversation a little bit better.
Okay, fair enough. So we have made reference already to the fact that there are segregated pools of funds available for the SMEs in particular, and for entities that are involved in the productive sector. A majority of our banks here in Jamaica are engaged in retail banking, and most, if not all of them, have specialized pools for that.
I think we're having a little bit of a break
commercial
there.
Market, stronger risk profiles have started to benefit from interest rate reductions, and I almost hesitate to mention this, but if you were at the auto show at the arena a couple of weeks ago, you may have noted for motor vehicle loans.